Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Inspired Career Spotlight on Careers, the video podcast series where I interview professionals from all over the career management space to bring you best-in-class career management information to keep you up to date and help you advance in your careers. And today, I have a very special guest, Stan Miller. Hi, Stan.
Hi, Kathy. It's nice to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to have Stan here today because Stan is a friend of mine. Stan is a colleague of mine, and Stan is here to talk about one of the most important topics that career professionals and really all of us have to talk about. But let me introduce him first, and we are going to get into it. So Stan is the driving force behind Storicate, which empowers business leaders to elevate their impact through storytelling. Having trained over 3,000 professionals, he's the architect behind 4P storytelling framework, an innovative approach to communicate career stories. Stan's collective work with companies like AT&T and VMware, coupled with his thought leadership at USC and Cornell, has solidified his message as transformative. As a LinkedIn top storytelling voice and a 2-time South by Southwest workshop host, Stan continues to innovate the way professionals convey their stories and build human connections. He lives in Orlando, Florida with his wife of 20 years and is a proud dad of 2 daughters. Welcome, Stan.
Thanks so much, Kathy. It's great to be here with you today and feels like a very warm, welcoming, friendly conversation because I miss you. I haven't seen you in some time. So it's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, I miss you too. And, I always start out by asking people to tell a little bit about their story. So why don't we do that a little bit, kind of get people up to date about why we're even talking. And then let's just kind of talk and catch up ourselves. And then people can understand why we're talking a little bit more. But Stan, you have an incredible story to tell yourself. So why don't you share that a little bit?
Yeah. So thanks, Kathy, again, for having me on. I like to think about my career in terms of my story in 3 chapters. And it's a bit of a reinvention story, if you will. And in chapter 1, I spent 12 years with AT&T. And so working in big corporate in 7 different roles. And so traversing that journey taught me a lot about myself, about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And about halfway through that journey, so the year 6 of the 12, I got laid off and let go. I was let down. I was surprised. I was also a high potential leader and participating in all sorts of leadership development programs and mentoring. So I developed this love for mentoring others during that time, but I was also experiencing the turmoil that is corporate America and the lack of opportunity that I was seeing in terms of where I desired to go, where I felt like I deserved to be. And I just wasn't able to break through in terms of getting to those higher levels of leadership. And so then I started looking at myself in the mirror and saying to myself, do you want to die the phone guy? And the answer was no. And so what I didn't mention is, 6 years into the AT&T career, I got let go. It took me a year to come back, and I actually went back to AT&T. So that's why I say it's a 12-year journey with a 6-year pause.
Yeah.
And so in chapter 2, I decided to leave. And I went to a relatively young company that was a financial technology company that had raised quite a bit of money to develop and deliver a technology that was in financial technology. And so it was different. And we didn't have a sales force. I had to help build a sales force. We weren't profitable. And we utilized our resources and our talents to build a team. And 5 years later, after multiple capital raises and lots of layoffs and just sort of shifts and pivots that are associated with the startup world, we finally made it to profitability. But I had one of those mirror moments again when I thought to myself, I really want to help people at scale. I really love mentoring and developing teams of people. But I also understood during that time, I had my own career success transform, meaning I started as a director. And 5 years later, I found myself with a startup where I was a C-level executive. And that was something I never imagined that was possible working for AT&T. But in the startup space, I was thriving. I had a team. I was leading people and mentoring and developing others. And there was also a lot of stress associated with that position where we had moved into profitability. And then there was a high expectation that we would then start to generate, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And I had just I've gotten exhausted. And I decided that I wanted to do something different. And I went back to school and got a degree in media and communications. And my first course was storytelling. And I had that light bulb moment that most of us have at some point in our careers. For me, it was very late in my career, which was, wow, storytelling isn't just for marketing and big companies. Storytelling is reserved for us. It's not just for movies. It can be used for us to create narratives and beliefs and build beliefs in our career. And so I decided to start teaching people how to tell story. I just steeped myself in storytelling and started utilizing my own skills and helping people develop their stories. And eventually I got to a point where I built a business. And so I graduated school. And in chapter 3, I decided to leave the startup, retire as an executive, and start my own practice of coaching storytelling. And so that's what I've been doing. Over the last 2 years, I've worked with AT&T, VMware, Cornell, USC, as you said earlier, taught over 3,000 people how to tell stories. And I actually now have a 6-month mastermind program where I teach people how to use storytelling to build their brand and influence. And so that's now what I'm strictly focused on. And I'm having a great time, Kathy, doing it.
I can tell you are. Stan, can I tell you that I didn't know they taught storytelling in school when you said that you took a course in that. I didn't even know that they had that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that if you take a marketing course, there is always a portion of the marketing course, typically is going to be a storytelling component. And in marketing, like companies spend millions and sometimes billions of dollars creating narratives and telling stories. And that brings customers and brings loyalty and creates this brand. And we, as career job seekers in our career, there are a lot of coaches and they're right. They say, build your brand. But your brand isn't just a logo or your image on LinkedIn or, your color scheme or your typography. It's actually what people believe about you. And so what people believe about you is driven by what you say about yourself, whether it's online or in person.
And don't you I find in my work that, and even my personal life, the hardest thing is people just don't know how to talk about themselves. Right? I mean, you say what they say about themselves, but they don't even know how to do effectively because they're self-conscious. They're afraid to brag. They don't know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of it, Kathy, is people associate telling stories about themselves with bragging, accolades, achievements, and awards. And my philosophy is more of a paradigm shift where I teach people to talk about who they've helped, what others have received, what their problems were, what their desires were, how I essentially helped them achieve their goals. And so the paradigm would be, let's not spend a ton of time bragging about ourselves. Let's actually tell stories of how we've impacted others, whether it's companies or projects. And that seems to feel better for people because they don't feel like they have to talk about themselves, but they are in fact sharing a message about themselves.
Yeah, it breaks down the barriers. And I think especially for women, because I find that my women clients have a harder time speaking about themselves. And even women I know, they do, owning what they do and owning the impact that they've made. But Stan, what do you think it is about the storytelling piece? When you share the stories about your failures, your successes, how you've helped others, what is that trigger between people, do you think, that is what wraps them together? Why it's such an impact, why it's such a magnet for people, and why now we can't get enough of it?
Well, I mean, we start with thinking about, why do we watch movies? Why will you binge a Netflix series? Right?
Why do I watch The Godfather 15,000 times?
Right. Because you want to feel, you want to be engulfed in a story. We have a deep desire to develop understanding through stories. And we think inherently that, all of us that enjoy movies or TV shows or some sort of series find ourselves captivated. And sometimes we see ourselves in the story. Like there are parts of the story that we can relate to. And so if we learn to utilize the powers that are the patterns that are used for movies and used for series and used for stories, for great stories for ourselves, we then become empowered to create that same emotion that we get in others. But the challenge is that we've been taught to sell ourselves. And so selling yourself is the opposite of telling stories. Showing up and just presenting a highlight reel is simply not enough in today's market.
Well, it's that dreaded elevator pitch.
Right.
Everybody getting their elevator pitch down, and it's horrible. It's uncomfortable for who's creating it. It's uncomfortable for who's hearing it. And I don't even know if anybody's listening anymore. I think it's gotten to the point where it's white noise for anybody listening. And imagine coming across with a statement that's not an elevator pitch, but it really is about who you help and what you do, as opposed to, I'm from this school, I'm looking for this, and I can do this for you. Goodbye. It is a whole different presentation.
You're spot on. And if you think about this, when let's just say we're networking and you and I are in a networking event, what we must understand is that what other people desire to know in networking events is who you help, how, and what others will get in return. So they are always qualifying. We as people are always qualifying people we meet to determine whether or not that relationship is a good fit. Now, this works in networking and also works in dating, right? So we're always qualifying. And so if you are not clear on your value, what you offer, what they can get from you, you will be confusing them and they will move on. And so this is why sharing the things that you've done only create competition. So when you meet with someone, and let's just say you're in a networking event, you're sharing all of your accolades, that forces them to share theirs. And if theirs are more impressive than yours, why should they connect with you?
Mm-hmm.
What's the motivator? And so we just have to change the venue. We have to change the game, and we have to start communicating our value and not having it be about the accolades and awards and achievements that we've been taught that we should share.
I always tell my clients too that so much of job search and so much success in the workplace is about likability.
Mm-hmm.
And people just don't think too much about that. And when I tell them, when they're going for interviews, by the time you get into the interview, you're already qualified for the job, right? Oftentimes that interview is really about, do they like you well enough? Who do they like best? Who can they see in their organization? Who's going to be that good fit? Who do they want to have to look at every day? And
That's right.
right?
Yeah, that's totally right. And if you think about it, what you said is spot on. In terms of when you get an interview, like here's the way I look at interviews. There's 250 people maybe that have applied for this job. Mm-hmm. 6 people are going to get an interview. They've already said yes to you. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening to this call right now or watching this video right now, if you get an interview, they've said yes. Your only job, the only job you have is to convince them that they've already made the right decision. So I need to show up and convince them that their gut instinct about having me interview was right. I am who they believe I am. And yes, I just want to reaffirm that yes. But too many of us practice through rehearsal and performance. And so we're over-rehearsed. We're thinking of this as a performance. Therefore, we're inauthentic. And honestly, a lot of us blow it in those opportunities. So why do people pick us? You said because of likability. I think of it similar, maybe describe it a little differently than you. I think of it as trust. Mm-hmm. They will hire who they trust. Now, trust has 3 components. One is core competencies and skills. That's one component. But when we prepare for interviews, many of us are just preparing to talk about those.
Yeah.
The other 2 components that we don't generally talk about, which by the way are revealed through stories, are how will you behave or cultural fit, and how will you approach problem solving. See, you can't show up and they can't learn these things about you unless you tell them stories about how you've helped others before, solve problems, and how you've behaved in those scenarios. And so if you can perform those 3, that equals trust, and you're more likely to get the yes at the end.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also develops a feeling within them, right? The feeling of trust, the feeling of likability, whatever.
Sure.
And instead of having that sterile feeling of, describe this to me, tell me this example, blah, 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 right? Now you're standing out. Now you've elicited an emotion in them. That comes to that trust and that likability factor. Now you've established that connection with somebody. Now they can see you taking that out into the floor with the other employees that work there. Now they can see that, oh, now this person is different. This person isn't going to be the same. The other 5 people that I interviewed, all white bread, all the same kind of people. This person is different. This person is going to do something. And if everybody's the same, they don't need you. And so if you're explaining things the same and you're given the same rattle and you're just doing all the same things, how can they possibly tell what you're really capable of?
Mm-hmm. Well, if they feel like you are rehearsed, and this isn't just for interviews, by the way. I know we've been talking about interviews. This is in executive presentations. This is in your leadership development programs. When you meet an executive, this is your, skip level meetings. It applies everywhere. If they feel like you're rehearsed, they'll feel like there's an inauthenticity happening, and they'll take that into account. But if they feel like you are sincere, authentic, and you are communicating your value, and you're also willing to share some of your failures or learning lessons, this is what flips the switch with people in terms of trust. Because Kathy, if you think about it, authenticity meets authenticity many of the times. So we decide to be authentic to a certain level. And then what happens most of the time is the person we're dealing with decides to tell us and share with us based on what we've shared at what level we're sharing. So you go out with a friend, you share about a struggle you're dealing with, and then all of a sudden you find out 5 things about them you've never known because they've dealt with something similar. Well, the only reason that you've learned that is because you've shared.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And over time, I've learned that lesson very much the hard way. Like, I used to be of the mentality of, because I was the coach, I wouldn't tell anything about myself because I didn't want to, kind of like the newscaster, right? The news isn't about me. I didn't want to share anything about myself because I wanted to focus completely on my clients. So I never did that on LinkedIn. I never really did that with my clients until I don't know how it started. But one day I started kind of sharing little bits, and it was amazing how it really opened up different levels of communication. My story used to share all the great things I did. And then when I started sharing stories about my struggle as a single parent for 25 years and ways that I was kind of embarrassed about some of the things I had been through. And then when I started sharing little things about that and how, some of the mistakes I had made early on in my business and different things, people, when I talk about that on LinkedIn, as opposed to just sharing facts, my stuff goes viral.
Yeah. I mean, we all should be striving for those moments. And for me, my moment was I was invited to a networking event, and it was a good friend of mine. And so after work, this was when I was at the startup, after work, I walked to this networking event. It was in walking distance. And so I'll never forget it. It was so hot. I live in Florida, so I'm sweating on the way there. I have sort of a suit on because I wore a suit that day. I was going to a networking event, feeling like, I wanted to meet some people and network in the community. And I got there, and my friend who was hosting the event said, my keynote speaker dropped out, and I need you to help me and fill in and be a keynote speaker. Now, this was years ago. And it wasn't, this isn't a big event. There's probably 100 or 200 people there, which for some people would really
be a big event.
I freaked out a bit. And I said, listen, I don't know what to share. And he said, just share stories about yourself. He says, I need your help. And at first I thought about saying no. But then I said, okay, I'll do it. And I was nervous. I had some anxiety. And it was the first time that I had ever really felt in a corporate setting not prepared to share. Because corporate training had taught us, have your deck, come with your drive, you've got your 10 slides, all of the things that we think that we need, right? Yeah. So what I did was I got up there and I just shared about 30 minutes of my background, my upbringing, some of my core values and my stories. And after that, there was like an unlocking in me that was like, you're good enough. Your story's good enough. If you just came to this event with your story, that's enough. And after that, I remember leaving that event. First of all, nervous, anxiety, all of that stuff. Once I got flowing, it was okay. But I'd shared things in that venue that I'd never shared publicly in a business setting. And after that, I remember walking back to my office with my friend. And he said to me, I learned 10 things about you tonight that I've never known. And I now am viewing you and your career differently. And that is what spoke to me. And I knew, and what I'm looking to do now is help people create the moments like I had. Because most people will never have that moment because they're fearful of stepping on that stage.
So how do they get beyond it though, Stan? That's the thing. It's hard to define where that line is.
Well, the first step is being in a safe place.
Yeah.
Right? There was 100 people in that venue, but I felt safe because I had my friend there with me and I knew he believed in me. People believing in you, feeling safe, and practice. The challenge is when you are trying to learn how to tell your story, you're going to your friends many times and they don't know how to give you feedback because they're not really sure what a good story is.
Yeah.
So you're inside the Coca-Cola can, you can't read the label and you're practicing and you're expecting them to read the label, but they're your friends. So they want to tell you all the good things that are on the label. They don't want to tell you any of the bad ingredients in that story.
Right.
And so being in a safe place, in a community, in a place where people can and want to improve and help you improve, for me, that's the answer.
When people have the opportunity, if they feel that they're in a safe place, I think people still don't know how much to share, how much is too much. I just wrote a blog article on it the other day. So this must be like the universe telling us this is the right topic and about knowing your audience or whatever. But if people want to kind of dip their toes in this water, I think the barrier for most people to take that brave step is, I don't know where the boundaries are. And I don't mean people going crazy with stuff. I think people generally hold back too much. So how do people know where to even start to kind of increase that brave muscle? Like, how do they even know?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand, like, you have to lean on evidence. And so you have to decide, okay, I believe that story works. I believe that stories are communicated in patterns. And if I learn the patterns of storytelling that work, why can't I use them for me? So it's really easy for me to convince someone that storytelling works when I tell them at the beginning of the Hunger Games, Katniss, who has problems and desires, meets Haymitch, who has empathy and authority, leads her to a climax, which is the game. And then the final result of that game, or the falling action in the game, the new reality is her and Peeta in the first Hunger Games are about to kill themselves and they win the game. We know that story. We love that story. We love Star Wars. We love The Matrix, where Neo meets Morpheus, right? We know that there's story dynamics and we know characters. And so I just simply say, okay, if I could teach you how to not be the hero, yet be the mentor with empathy and authority in your career, helping people who have problems and desires, leading them to pathways of success for them, and you actually get rewarded for that, is that something you can buy into? And then I teach them the pattern. Once you know the pattern, you start to think like a storyteller.
I also think, and I'm not going to say this right, because I just wrote this a note to myself this morning. I think when you don't share your story, you're denying people the ability to connect with you. Like, it's denying people. It's denying them your gifts. It's denying them something. Like, I think people think that they're taking from others when they're sharing their story. And in reality, you're giving, right?
You are giving, but you are also influencing their belief systems.
Yeah.
So think about this. You've heard of the 80-20 rule, right? How would you describe, Kathy, the 80-20 rule? Like, just in your own terms.
20% of the people give you 80% of the problems, or 20% of the people give you 80% of whatever, or 20.
Yeah, or 20% of the people do all the work.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like, everybody has this thing in their mind on what the 80-20 rule is.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? The reason we have something, because that is a narrative or a belief system that we have. And that has been given to us because of experiences and stories that we've heard, been told, and experiences we've lived. So, frankly, why is it important for us to tell our story? Because you must control the stories, because if you don't, the narrative will be out of your control. And so they will start to put together what they believe about you. You can shape that and build this belief system in others. And that's how you get promoted. That's how you get opportunities, because you want them thinking about you. You want to be in the room. You want your story in the room, in the rooms that you are not in, because the decisions are made in the rooms that you are not in.
That reminds me of when I tell my folks too that your work doesn't speak for itself. People think, oh, my work speaks for itself. No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a voice.
Again, this is a narrative that we have believed because we've heard it so many times.
Yeah.
Our parents told us, just go heads down. Your work's going to speak for yourself. Somebody's going to notice you.
Nope.
In today's environment, that's not the way it works. Mm-hmm. And so you have the ability as a storyteller to influence what people believe about you. So why is it important to tell your story? Because they have no way of developing a belief system outside of that. And so if you feel like you're unnoticed right now, it might be because you're not saying much. You're just showing the results in the work.
Yeah.
They don't know you. People pick people they know and trust.
Yeah.
To do jobs.
100%. My mother always used to say it's not about the work, it's about the people. Right. And that goes back to what we said earlier about likability and trust and so forth. But hey, Stan, is there ever such a thing as a bad story?
Yeah. One that's too long, that's confusing, that has too many characters, that has no point and never ends. So I want you to imagine telling a story. I look at a story like, okay, you're in a plane and there's a runway. And what you want to do is you want to get off of that runway and you want to get that story in the air. Most people, their stories are too long-winded, especially at the beginning, because they're trying to set up so much context. They can't get that plane off the ground. And the runway, they run out of runway, and then we have a crash. And so if you can't start the story right, you certainly can't land in the destination. So what you've got to do is get that thing off the runway. You've got to get in the air, and you've got to land that thing safely with your passenger, who is your audience, at your destination.
And this is important, folks that are watching this, because I have given this feedback, but you use a much better analogy, a much better metaphor for it than I did. I love the runway. However, I want to share this video, and I want people to watch this for interviews, because I had 2 people this week that I gave that advice to. Too much yakking during the interviews, too much setting up the stories. And one of them actually got feedback in the interview that they were just talking too darn much and not getting to the point. And the other one I had to give the feedback to say, just cut to the chase. I just think too, we want to set everything up, but by the time you're asked the question in the interview, the interviewer knows the answer. They don't need you to give all the details. They just want to hear your interpretation and the value that you add to the issue in hand.
Yeah. I mean, you're so right. At the beginning of the story, it's so critical. Some people, and again, these aren't terrible stories. It's just they're wrong and they don't resonate as well as they could. Some people open the story with the end of the story. So they open the story with what was achieved. You've just revealed the end of the story at the beginning of the story. Now, you don't have like movies have. You ever watch a movie where at the opening scene, someone gets killed and then you go back and figure out how it all happened?
Uh-huh.
We've seen those types of movies. That's an hour and a half that they have to put all that together. You have 3 to 5 minutes. You can't do that. It doesn't work the same way in your career. Build the story up, create the transformation. So what are the best stories? Well, the best stories show a transformation from where someone was to where they are ultimately at the end. And you are in between helping them get from where they were to where they are. And so the bigger the transformation, the better the story.
And Stan, I hope people that are listening to this recognize that everybody has those transformation stories. I don't care where you work, what you do. When you're working with people, even if you're behind the scenes, your product that you're creating, whatever technology you're doing impacts people. And there's an end user to everything. When I used to work in retail, we were in a warehouse. Our end users were the people in the grocery stores that brought that actually picked the shampoo off of the shelves that we put on there from our warehouse. So we always had that was our customer in our mind, right? And how can we provide that in the timely fashion? So I want everybody to recognize that this is for everybody. So if you think your story isn't of value, if you think the work you do doesn't really impact people, because people say that to me all the time, well, that's not the kind of work I do. Yeah, it is. You just have to dig a little bit deeper, perhaps, to find out how that is and translate it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people that are in that mindset must understand that if they don't believe there's value in the stories that they have lived and their experiences, it's almost impossible for you to convey anything with confidence in an interview. Mm-hmm. It damages your confidence when you don't believe that you've done something transformative in your past.
Yeah.
And so the truth is you have. The truth is that sometimes it takes a great career coach, a great coach like you, to pull that out of people. And they're fortunate when they get to meet with you and you can work with them to build up that belief. Because I feel like confidence sometimes is half the battle in terms of getting where you want to go. People lack self-esteem, they lack confidence. And what you want to do is believe your story, know how to tell that story, and you want it to be easy for them to bring meaning, to develop meaning from your stories. So when you're meeting with other people, it just makes sense.
Yeah. And I know with me, when I mentioned before, like I had to own my story. I had to recognize that there was value in things that happened to me in my life and things that I don't want to say ashamed of, but things that had happened to me that I didn't talk about very much. In the end, that was something that resonated with people that nobody was talking about. And that's what people wanted to hear about. It was incredible. It kind of like took the mask off, and it opened the door, the floodgate for real conversation. And I don't know, I just feel like when people can see you at a whole different level, everything changes.
Yeah, agreed.
Everything changes. Stan, we don't have too much more time here, but I do want to just cover quickly the power of groupthink in terms of, I know you have the mastermind that you mentioned, and as people come together, and I know that I have been part of you have couple things going on, right? You talk, you travel, you speak to groups, and you have your mastermind community, and you have your career Copilot community where people come together and they tease out their stories and they share them and they practice them with each other. What do you think fundamentally, like why do you recommend that people should get into groups and talk about and practice? What is that real fundamental value about being able to share those? Is it that safe space? Is that creativity? Is it getting the feedback? Is it all of it?
Yeah. So in the career Copilot community, which by the way is exclusively for job seekers at this point, right? So when you're a job seeker, you and I both know it's a lonely journey. It's hard.
And everybody, the market this year sucks.
You can scroll LinkedIn forever and get a billion tips and don't know which one's going to work and just try everything.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I met with so many people one-on-one that had told me, I'm a job seeker, Stan. I want you to coach me one-on-one. I want to learn storytelling, but I'm unemployed and I can't make this type of investment right now. And I decided to, as a coach, stop allowing them to say no to themselves. And I gave them permission to say yes through this Copilot community. And so I do teach storytelling in there. They can get lessons from me, their video recording. I have great coaches like you and others that are world famous coaches, like world famous influencers on LinkedIn, like yourself, that have a following, that have tremendous insights to give in my community. And so people can join for just almost such a minimal investment on a monthly basis to get that insight inside of the career community. And what they do, and the Copilot is they come in and they figure out, I'm not alone. People are sharing what's really working. I'm seeing people get jobs. So I'm not seeing the horror stories. I'm not hearing the horror stories. I'm a part of a community, and people end up getting jobs in there. And I just think I love it so much. I think it's wonderful. And it's just like a great joy for me to see people winning. And I just want to cheer them on. Now, the other community, of course, is not for everyone. It is for people that don't want to have to worry about their resume, that don't want to have to worry about what's next, that are intentional about planning and becoming influential in their career and want to become a desired entity, right? That is a mastermind in 6 months with me. We teach storytelling, creating stories, how to share them. We work together as a group. We teach personal branding in there, and then how to build an influential network. So we take it from story all the way to building a network where opportunities are flowing to you, and you never have to worry about whether or not I'm getting laid off again or what my company's doing. And that's, again, that's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm. But listen, everybody, excuse me, Stan, let me tell you, everybody, Stan says this because the number one way people find jobs is networking, right?
Yeah. It really is. And I just want people to imagine this reality, and I want them to experience a reality where if they ever experience turbulence in their career, whether they've had it before or will have it again, if you have influence, truly have influence and a network, those things don't bother you anymore. You don't worry about what's next. You know you have advocates because you've been giving. You've been planting seeds. You've been making deposits in people's lives. And when you do that, when it's time for a withdrawal, there's equity. There's equity there. The problem is that most of us are making no deposits. And then we lose our job and we need a withdrawal.
Yeah.
And we're expecting that withdrawal to be made. And it's really, really hard for us to create that. And we don't feel confident about it because we haven't been making deposits. I mean, think about it. When people lose their job, now they're reaching out to their network asking for help. Well, the truth is that people do want to help you. But just imagine a time where you've been giving for 2 years and how easy that help is going to come. And so I'm really teaching people something a bit different, a bit of a paradigm around networking inside this community. And the fun thing for me about all of this, Kathy, is that I do a 2-day event every single month. It's not for job seekers per se. It's for career professionals, leaders, mid-level leaders, and senior executives. That is a 2-day storytelling event where I just spend 4 hours on a whiteboard teaching people storytelling. And for me, that's the thing that I look forward to the most. That's on my calendar every single month.
You light up when you just talk about that.
I love it. I just love it because for me, there's no PowerPoint. There's no deck. There's no preparation. It's like I'm showing up to teach you storytelling and show you how this thing works. And it's not a big webinar. It's usually about 50 people. And then from that, people make a decision on whether or not they want to continue working with me or not. And that's okay.
I think the thing that we're talking about here is that people need to understand that job search, career management has fundamentally changed. And if you have not searched for a job in, say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you think that you're going to flip into the same habit that you did then the last time you found a job, it is a completely different world. The same principles do not apply. Everything is different. And the old days and it's not even about the resume anymore, although it is, but it's not even about that anymore. It is about the whole structure of how it works. It's about relationships. Everything is different now. And that's really what you're teaching.
Yeah, we're trying to teach people how to build influence through storytelling. And the influence is what we should all be desiring. Like, if we have influence, we could help people. If we have influence, we could be helped. And so the greatest part of being influential in your circles is being able to help people. But it also works in reverse, which is like when you need help, you've got plenty of people to call.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And speaking of wonderful, so are you. And I appreciate the time you've given to us today, Stan. I missed you. I haven't seen you in forever. And Stan is very generous with his time coming on today to speak with us. He has spoken with my clients in a community as well. And he's just such a treasure. So thank you so very much, Stan, for your time today.
Yeah, I love the work that you're doing, Kathy, and the work that you're doing to help people clarify their resumes and really get clear on their career. You're doing a great service to people. I admire you, and thank you so much for having me on. Really.
All right, we're gonna end on a fun note here. So I shared before with you, we're talking about movies and stuff and watching them over, and I said Godfather, because Godfather is my favorite movie in the world. You're a story.
Okay.
What's your favorite story? What's your favorite movie?
Oh, my favorite. Okay. So I have lots of favorite movies, but I'm going to tell you that one of my favorite movies is the movie Tommy Boy,
Uh,
which is a comedy.
yes, I've seen it.
And by the way, if you know Tommy Boy, you would know that it has Chris Farley, who's passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and David Spade.
Yeah.
And if you think about story dynamics, Chris Farley is the hero with problems and desires in that movie that needs to learn how to sell. And David Spade is the guide or mentor that helps him take him on the road, teaching him how to sell to save his dad's company.
Yeah.
And so it's all framework and pattern.
I love it.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know that. We didn't even plan that, folks. And look how perfect that turned out. All right. That's an extra gift. That's an extra point right there.
That's an Easter egg in the session for sure.
I love that. I didn't used to know what Easter egg meant before. Somebody had to tell me that too. So everything's changing. You got to stay on top of things, folks.
Yes.
All right. So that's going to tie it up for us today. Thank you again, Stan. Thank you so very much.
Thanks so very much.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Listen, before you're done here, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, and make sure you get our next episode to deliver here. And thank you all. And until we meet again, live inspired.